Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'll see what I can do with your generosity. I very much welcome the addition, in particular, to funding to increase young people's involvement in the planning system. Jamie Hepburn made some substantial reference to that. For my part, I've seen youngsters from the age of 8 take part in planning for real exercises in my constituency. There are a limited way in which a much wider range of people than is normally the case can participate meaningfully in strategic planning. I also welcome the planned further work on charrettes. I participated as a minister in a charrette in Aberdeen a few years ago. It was an excellent approach, which I understand Mr Coffey is going to add some remarks to the debate on in his contribution. The charrettes do open the door to a wider range of people to be involved in local development. So I think whatever we're doing in this debate and the continuing evolution of the planning system, both at strategic and at specific level, if we can find new ways of getting people meaningfully involved at the right time, that's going to be good. And of course that draws to us the contrasting difficulty of engaging the general public in strategic planning in comparison to the energy which will be brought to decisions that are local in their scope. And I think Mark Griffin, in particular, in his contribution, raised that issue and illustrated the difficulty. I think what he perhaps failed to take on is the role that all of us who are elected members can have when strategic plans of whatever character are being brought forward, of taking forward issues that we can identify will be of relevance to the people we represent, and I think we all have a role in that. To rely on advertisements in papers or elsewhere is not going to be sufficient. Because often when there is local discontent that's focused on a local proposal, the essence of that discontent hangs on the strategic framework within which that is being brought forward. Often little consulted on, often little understood. So a key part of what we should be doing is to deconstruct the barriers to engagement in strategic planning, because that will lead to improved local decision-making. Now, the Minister referred to the planning professionals who are at the heart of the system. The enthusiasm of young planners in particular is to be commended, but many of the planning proposals which cause greatest difficulty are difficult because of the approach of the applicant rather than the response of the planners. Sarah Boyack seemed to think in an intervention she made that all the delays are down to the planning system and government departments. The reality is, and developers acknowledge this, that often inadequate applications are a source of an inadequate planning response that's seen. So I do hope that the planning system will continue to engage with the developers to assist them to make their contribution to the planning system a substantially better one, to help them raise their game. I very much look forward to the National Planning Framework 3. I'm much encouraged by the substantial environmental focus, especially the linkage to addressing the critical subject of climate change. National Planning Framework 2, which I brought forward as a minister, included the Central Scotland Green Network, and I was delighted yesterday as part of the Local Government and Regenerations Committee's work when we visited Cumbernauld on a regeneration exercise to hear reference to the Central Scotland Green Network. I do think that the Labour amendment focuses on issues that many local communities will get involved in when they talk about fracking. But, of course, it merely and perfectly illustrates, and I welcome this, the limitations of the powers of this Parliament and the difficulties that that creates. I'm always willing to hear of a recruit to the argument for greater powers for this place in relation to fracking. I too have welcomed hearing of concerns about enforcement mechanisms, because I think very few of us will not have had some approaches from our constituents that relate to perceived imperfections in the enforcement process. And I very much welcome the idea that we can do more on that. Now, the publication of numbers about performance of different local authorities can be particularly interesting, and the government does that. Looking at the local authority that is the majority of my constituency, I see that in local developments, and there's a big enough number that the percentage is meaningful, that the average time that it takes to deal with these is 50% higher than the Scottish average. Now, in the Shire and in Aberdeen, we've seen a continuation of the level of planning applications that there was before the economic crunch. Across Scotland, where we've seen a reduction in planning applications, I think it's disappointing that there has not actually been an improvement in the performance of the planning system, which you would expect when the resource is there, but the number of applications reduces. So I do hope that councils are not using this as an opportunity to deprioritise planning in their priorities, because it remains a vital spring for sustainable economic growth and matters often in very small degree to householders who want to make changes that don't fall within permitted development rights, as well as to big local and international developers. I'm delighted to hear in the Minister's contribution the substantial progress that is being made. I'm delighted that, however, the challenge that remains is being engaged with. I have a family connection to some of this when my great-uncle Alexander Stevenson chaired the first Scottish meeting of the Royal Town Planning Institute in the late 1920s, and I'm delighted to continue to have some involvement in this issue. The Minister referred to pace and pragmatism. I think that should be the watchwords for this issue. I look forward to supporting the Government's motion at decision time. Presiding Officer.